characterization. Hope you all get to learn a lot from it and enjoy. Yeah. Over to you, Ruman.
Thanks. So yeah, nice to meet all of you. I'm going to be looking like this because there's a screen here and then there's another screen down here, just so you guys know. But I am looking at you guys. Yeah. So my goal today with this workshop is to basically go through the process of, in general, how you're supposed to characterize, and also how to make your characterization stronger, better, or realistic, whatever word you like to call it. I just used realistic because it sounded cool. Um, like I said, this is going to be an interactive session, so you guys can like feel free to basically raise your hand, ask questions, and things like that. So with that said, let me share my screen and get this presentation rolling. Share with sound, because maybe I will show some videos. Cool. Does everyone see my screen?
Yes, it's visible.
Cool. Let me quick slideshow. Okay, so as I said, the topic of today's workshop is realistic characterization. Before I get into it, I would just like to ask everyone, like, what are your main troubles when characterizing? What types of questions you have? Let's just get out some so that we know that everything is addressed. So who would like to share?
Uh, I think one thing I struggle with is coming up with characterizations that are like likely to occur. So I kind of struggle with doing the likelihood analysis of what is most probable to play out, and that is kind of where I usually end up losing debates.
Yep, yeah, that's for sure one of the main problems. Yeah. Anybody else? So we had likelihood.
I feel I also struggle with characterizations and motions that I don't really have a lot of idea about. Like if it's an IR motion or something that I haven't read a lot about, I don't know how to go about thinking when it comes to those motions.
Yeah, IR motions are their own specific beast for sure. We can separate some time. I didn't really think about this, but I'll segment some time within the workshop specifically to address IRs. There is a slide for that. What about some other motions? Is there anything else?
There's also something in the chat. So Trisha says that how to avoid extreme characterizations.
Yeah, that's a good question to answer. Like the whole workshop will answer this question, but I'll also segment for that as well. Okay, cool. These are very good questions. Let's then get into it. And if you guys want to ask a question, just use the raise hand emoji and I'll get to it. Okay, so the first thing that we need to establish when we're talking about characterization is firstly how to characterize. So let's firstly go to the basics and then we're going to build up upon this. So apologies if this is like very simple. There's also going to be a practical exercise after I explain the basics and some examples from me as well. Well, why doesn't this work? Okay, so basically, how to characterize. Characterization has two components, and I see that this. Okay, this is good. Characterization has two components basically. The first component is what are the features or traits of the thing that we're characterizing. So this could be people, groups of people, organizations, states, regions, religions, corporations, anything that's basically comprised of like humans or human being that can be explained. That and also some other things. So basically, the question we're asking ourselves is how does this look like, right? Like how would you explain it to someone who either hasn't seen this type of thing that you're trying to explain, or is like a very they aren't very versed in this type of thing. So this is the visualization aspect of the characterization itself. So from this starting point, you in generally have to explain how does this look like, visualize it, and sell it to the judge. Then is the second component of the characterization, which is what are the reasons as to they have these characteristics. So what are the incentives, factors that influence their behavior, or anything else that basically makes them tick the way that they tick. Questions that we need to ask ourselves is, why does this look like the way it does? So what is the reasoning behind it looking like this? Or why, simply put, why is this a likely characterization to begin with? Now, these processes in an ideal world should be separate, right? Like you should, or at least in the speech itself, it should be separate when you're characterizing something, i.e. when you're explaining why something is the way it is. And then after that, explaining, okay, but why is this characterization likely? These are the reasons as to why this characterization is likely. Without both of these things, you are either susceptible of characterizing in a vacuum, i.e. explaining why something is the way it is, but, without necessarily without necessarily providing how does it look like, and the judge doesn't really get what you're saying. Like imagine this, you are saying, let's say, I don't know, people in the developing world think X way or something like that, or people in the developed world think X way. You just leave it like that, and then you give systematic reasons or structural reasons or whatever you like to call reasons for why this characterization is likely. But the judge doesn't really understand the importance of this characterization via the actual characterization, if that makes sense. Another thing is sometimes certain characteristics are different from other characteristics. So let's say we're looking at organized crime as a group, right? And organized crime has two sometimes very different competing incentives. On the one hand, they are organized crime, so they basically want to do illegal things to earn money. This is their primary trait or primary incentive on which they are functioning. And basically, what do? They resort to violence, they create business networks and things like that. Sometimes, however, organized crime also has the absolute opposite incentive to this. So, for example, during the pandemic and the early months of it, actually in Southern America, some of the criminal organizations there were the ones that were distributing vaccines and things like that, because they actually realized that, hold on, we can't have business and we can't have their version of business if we don't have individuals who are like, well, if this pandemic problem is happening, like we don't have workers, we don't have buyers and things like that, so we actually have to do societally good outcomes as a criminal organization. So this is kind of like an extreme example, but I think you just need to get to the point that sometimes within this characterization, some characteristics would require you to explain for you to explain on different levels why each incentive ties to that specific traits. So this varies on a spectrum. Sometimes it's as simple as these are the traits, these are the incentives, this is why it's likely. Sometimes the traits are a bit different and you need to provide different layers of explanation for each traits. I hope this makes sense, and you should try to identify these things as you go about. So this is the theory. Let's look at two examples that I have created. Again, this is not working. So example one. In general, Eastern European countries have more right-wing governments than left-wing governments. This is the trait or characteristic that we are trying to prove. How does this look like? This is the question that I ask. This looks like them, for example, being pro-EU. Sorry, can you mute yourself? Sorry, can you mute yourself? Can the admin also mute them?
Yeah, I muted them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But they don't seem muted.
Yeah, I muted them as well. So sorry about that.
Thank you very much. Please try your best to be muted, or if you have external sounds too. Okay, so how does this look like? This looks like, for example, these countries being like very pro-EU, pro-West, this being their main political and trading partners. This means that they, in general, incorporate such characteristics within them. And secondly, that they have low taxes, low spending, and there aren't that many social policies and things like that. These are the inherent characteristics of the governments there in the majority of cases, right? This is the majority of cases. So why is this characterization true? These countries used to be part of the USSR. This is the Soviet Union, which existed, which controlled these countries like since the end of the Second World War till 89 or 91. And they had very negative experiences in terms of the social policies in brackets that the USSR did. This led to things like, for example, economic crisis, poverty that many of these countries remember. Many of the rights were restricted. They were labor camps, secret police, and things like that, which in general, and the way people study the history within these countries, like Czechia, Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, and things like that, they are reminded that this is like a very dark period. So they necessarily tie you being left-wing or a socialist towards this particular regime or towards this particular set of countries, which in general, not in all cases, tilts the balance for you to be more right-wing or more conservative in a sense, more what the traditional aspect of a conservative is, rather than left-wing. There are exceptions to this. Obviously, there are some governments after 91 that were left-leaning. But however, if you want a funny example with this, in Bulgaria, we have a flat tax, and the flat tax was actually incorporated by the Bulgarian Socialist Policy, Bulgarian Socialist Political Party, because they realized that the majority of the voter base are actually right-wing. So even the left-wingers act in this particular. This is just a funny piece of trivia along the lines. But this is in general the way we point to the characteristics, we explain what the characteristic is, and then we provide reasoning for the said characteristic. Let's look at a second example. So example 2, social movements in developing countries focus on Western problems and not local problems. So basically, how does this look like? This looks like, for example, focusing on the gender pay gap or issues that are associated with third wave feminism, like, for example, like having the right to sexualize yourself and things like that, instead of, focusing on actual predominant issues that are within these countries, like, for example, domestic abuse, which is the #1 issue within these countries. The other characteristic would be wasting time virtue signaling. So like doing things like, I don't know, tweeting about what is the #1 leftist issue today and focusing your political capital, thought process, or time into this part of the characteristic instead of, actually focusing on building solutions to relevant problems that they have. I am 100% sure that all of you know what I'm talking about, and that this is an issue in your country if it's the same issue in my country. So basically, why is this a likely characterization? Because the founders of this like local social movement or whatever are usually like Western educated individuals who have imported this stuff because it didn't exist before. It also didn't exist in the West, like if you go a couple of decades back. This is fairly new concept and things like that. And basically, since they have spent so much time there, being educated around these types of circles of like the the woke type of people that are caring about these types of issues that are proximate to them, because the West is in general much more economically developed, much more better than most developing countries, or at least the majority of context within developing countries. They don't really have the same context-specific issues that are for these countries, meaning that the individuals who are educated there, who spend a lot of time around this social circle, who have internalized this message of, for example, the gender pay gap being the worst possible thing possible, that something else is a problem, that later when they return back to their countries, they necessarily have a bias towards these type of problems, a bias towards this type of messaging. They most likely also continue to read up and educate themselves from like Western media, like let's say the Wall Street Journal, the Economist, and things like that. They point out to these types of issues because these types of issues are the relevant issues within the Western echo chamber and their particular sphere, which means that their incentives are to overlook the actual systematic problems that are within these regions and to focus on problems that are not they're not existent, but on the hierarchy of priorities, they are less so important. Because I think we can all agree that, like, yes, gender pay gap is a problem, but domestic abuse is a worse problem in this particular case. But these people don't realize. And later, when they form their organization, when they talk to people, when they, as the leaders, are able to set the norm in these particular moments, they're able to tilt the focus to these type of things. And this is why many people are actually alienated from, like, the feminist movement in developing countries. Like in Bulgaria, for example, this is even a negative word. Because like you're thinking, oh, you're talking about all of these Western things and Western concepts and stuff like that, and like the actual women that, for example, want to talk about domestic abuse and problems like this, actual serious problems, have less political capital to do so because of this stereotype, this norm, or whatever is created. So like this is how you go from point A, how does this look like, to what's the analysis, to why is it important. I hope these two examples clear it up. Now what we're going to do is we're going to you guys are going to do one. So, well, a couple actually. So in the next slide, so let's do some together. I'm going to help you, obviously. I've got 4, like, let's call them classic examples. So like that pop up in debates all the time. So like corrupt democracies, corporations, center-left individuals, and anti-systemic parties. I've also attached a motion. We're looking at the government side on these motions. So yeah. So let's start with the first, corrupt democracies. The motion is this House believes that the EU should create a specialized court responsible for investigating and prosecuting political corruption across its member states. So who would like to characterize for the first part? So what are inherent traits to corrupt democracies? And this can be a team effort. You don't have to be just one person. Anyone?
Hello, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible, just a little hard to hear. Maybe you should get closer to the mic.
Is this better?
Yep, that's better. Yeah.
Awesome. If before I give it a shot, could you just uh, clarify a little bit more about what exactly characterizing this? Like, what am I supposed to characterize here? This motion.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. So basically, the motion is currently these countries, well, I'm kind of giving out the characterization, but currently these countries are stealing a lot of money from European Union funds. So the way that the European Union works is there's a pool of money that's taken from taxes and contributions, and then that pool of money is distributed to other countries. So as you can imagine, countries like Germany, France, Italy are contributing more to this pool than countries like, let's say, that are from the Eastern Bloc, Bulgaria, Poland, and countries like that. And so basically what happens is after they give this money to these countries, they end up stealing a large portion of it. So like the standard scheme is like you're building a highway, but the materials for the highway are 8 to 10 times what is the market price. So let's say if like a kilogram of cement would cost €10, they're buying it for €100, and they're not actually buying it for €100. They're buying it for the price, and then they're stealing the €80 for themselves. So basically, the argument is that this commission would deter this type of behavior or stop this type of behavior. So yeah, so we need to characterize these countries as to why, in a way, so that this solution can work, if that makes sense.
All right. So yeah, I'm not supposed to talk about why they do it, but instead why this specialized court would deter them from doing it, right?
Yeah, what are the characteristics that may lead to them changing their behavior?
Understood. Understood. Okay. A couple of minutes to think, if that's okay.
Yeah, you can take your time. If you guys think this is a hard example, we can go out to a more easier one, which isn't too. Okay, let's do that. Let's
Could I do the second one? If that's all right. I think
yeah,
I'd have an easier time with.
let's start with the second one. In the meantime, guys, like pick at least one. We're going to go through all of them. Pick at least one to like to think about on the government side. What is the characterization? So like let's do it. Let's do two.
All right. Apologies if I make mistakes. Let me. The way I might go about it is, all right. Maybe I'd go by saying, right now, multinational companies have already formed a very strong base in the developed world, and now they're expanding into developing countries. And developing countries usually have unstable governments and an unstable political climate, leading to more violence and riots and things like that. That's why I feel it would make more sense for multinational companies to militarize in order to secure their supply chains, because this would ensure that global trade is better and the goods reach the places where they do. And the reason I think this is true is because right now their their expansion is in countries that have more violence rather than less, and they need to do it to secure the supply chain in order to
So
expand output.
what is the reason as to why these countries are unstable, as you say? What is the reason?
Uh,
So they're unstable. That's fine.
okay,
That's first part. Start. Let's do the second part.
all right. So developing countries, all right, how would I go about it? I would say that developing countries are given the tag of developing because they started off at a place economically and socially further back than developed countries. That is, they were they probably have lesser resources, lesser leverage on a global scale, and that's why they're in a situation financially, economically, and socially that leads them to commit acts of violence and things like that because they don't have a. Okay, this is tough. My bad.
No, no, look,
Let
you're
me.
on the right track. You're on the right
Hmm,
track. So let's
I'm trying
break
to
it
think.
down.
All right,
Let's
all right.
break it down. Let's break it down. The sentences that you're making have two components. Component one is these countries are in a very bad position. Component two is because they're in a
Hmm,
bad position, they do violent acts against this. So let's build this together. Let's start with the first part. Why are these countries in a bad
all right.
position? The reasoning you give is they are developed. They weren't developing at the same pace as the West, as like the West. Why is this true? What is the historical
Hmm.
reason for this?
Um, I talk about things like colonialism and the fact that certain countries chose to take from other countries the resources, thereby essentially destroying their place in the world economy. Like India, before the British landed on their borders, they had, I believe, about 25% of uh, the economic wealth, at least globally. When they left, I think that it was less than 3%. So different reasons like colonialism, war, and aggressive trade would have led to some countries losing resources that they otherwise would have had, and other countries gaining resources that they otherwise wouldn't have had, leading to a
Perfect.
disparity. And that
You can stop it
disparity,
here. You can stop it here. Perfect.
all right.
That's good. Well, first part of characterization is explained. Second part of characterization is why does this create instability within these countries? This is the second
All
part.
right, instability within the country. Okay, maybe.
I think.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. I need some help here. I think this is the one this is the part of the most
Yeah,
characterization. This,
I think not especially very in line with the instability part, but just taking it down from the very thing about how you get it from colonialism and then etc. I think we can just go ahead and say that this multinational or MNCs tend to be from the countries who are where the past colonialists. So the countries which they try to go ahead and establish this exactly salty, but let's say not see them in good eyes per se. So it's like in their own benefit, or let's say it's their own advantage that you should militarize it so that you don't get that amount of backlash
Okay.
as a MNC
Okay,
because
let's stop
at the
here.
end of the day, you
Let's
are
stop
going
here.
for profit.
Let's stop here. So this is a good reason. However, it's a second tier reason. So like this is not the primary reason as to why instability happens. It could be a reason that you're pointing out to. Sorry, my dog is here. You guys are going to see her in this thing. It could be a reason as to why like this could be a reasoning against threatening violence and things like that. Is it the strongest reason? Probably not, because it's a reason that could be easily refuted. You could say, for example, these governments also have a lot to lose. They also care about, for example, having business there, having people having jobs and things like that. So, like, if I just give you these very simple responses, it doesn't matter if they had a colonial past, if their incentive is to have these types of jobs and things like that. So this is not a particularly strong reason. There's a much more simple reason that's connected to the colonialism and the outcomes today. Think about it. What is this reason?
maybe we could again tie it back to their origins and say that from the
It's not in the origins. It's
okay,
not in the origins.
not in the origins. All right. Why would
The
countries
companies,
right
the companies have nothing to do in this equation, just in
now?
this part. It
All
has to
right.
do with colonialism. It has to do about these countries being economically disadvantaged.
I think maybe it could be due to the fact that the resources that remain in the country are are valuable as well, and certain groups might want to have control for their own
Exactly.
personal interest, for their
Exactly.
own personal. Okay,
What are
okay,
these groups?
understood.
What are these groups?
Usually, there'll be political groups that want to get into the government, and once they're in the government, they would want to give tenders to certain multinationals or other companies that will, take money under the table basically
So these are
by exploiting their country.
criminal organizations, terrorist groups, far political parties, communists, whatever you like to call them.
Yes,
These are these
yes.
people. Okay. Why do these groups have a lot of support? And here, this is the link that's missing.
Okay.
It's connected to the first thing that we talked
Is
about.
it to do with nationalism? They appeal to the nationalist tendencies of the people. Is that it?
Okay, but why are people nationalists?
Okay.
Why do people succumb to nationalism?
The origin. Okay. So things like colonialism and invasion of opposing forces would breed this sort of nationalism in the people. That's why these groups have that much support. Is that what you're saying?
This is the first reason. There's also a second reason as to why people turn to nationalism. Like, think about it.
I think it's eluding.
What are the
All right.
people? What are the people that turn to nationalism? Why would they do this?
Maybe to uphold
economical option. Don't have if the prices are too high for you to continue existing. If you have all of these issues, then you are forced to take nationalism as a comfort mechanism to you or as some kind of explanation, the same way as religion does it. You join these groups have a lot of support. In certain cases, they may overthrow governments. In other cases, they may just be a terrorist organization within the country, and you leave it at that.
That sounds very logical. Yes, thank you. Understood.
Yes. Okay, and so we've explained why there's a high likelihood of these groups of people threatening multinational corporations' supply chain. The final part of the characterization is how do they threaten it?
Okay, so maybe the way I'd go about it is saying that a supply chain is essentially what? Going from raw materials to the finished product. And these countries, usually the developing countries, they are sources of raw materials. Rarely are they the producers of finished products. So when they see a multinational corporation taking raw materials out of their country, these nationalist tendencies will provoke them. Am I on the right track there?
Yes, and what will they do? What will they do?
What will the people do? The nationalist people, the supporters, or
yes, what will they do?
They'll take matters into their own hands. They might incur riots if there's a particular mine where you're, let's say, mining cobalt to put chips in phones. Then the people might go ahead and take over that plant, thereby disrupting the entire supply chain for most of the world. Something like that.
Exactly, and this is it. Good job. This is a full characterization.
Understood.
And then you have the problem built out, and then the solution is, well, if they have militaries, if they have a tank there or 500 people with guns, they can deter them or kill them. And it's as simple as that. Cool.
Could
great.
I ask a question?
Yep, sure. Go for it.
So the purpose of characterization, is it that you need to paint it as if it's a problem only your solution could solve? Is that it?
No. That's not it. This is an element to it. The purpose of characterization is simply doing two things: why something is the way it is, and why something why is it likely to be the way it is. This is the two inherent parts of the characterization. However, in different motions, this may act in different ways. So here, it's just explaining why it is a problem, building it up, and we have a very simple solution to it, which is dealing with that. In another debate, it could be something else. So that's actually a good thing, and this is why I try to keep the examples as why it is possible. If you think about it, motion 4 is very similar to motion 2 in these regards, but motion 3 is not. So let's do motion 3 actually. In this case, and you guys will be able to see it. So who would like to characterize motion 3? Anyone?
I think a claim that you can make here is to characterize how exactly has Europe been growing. Western Europe been growing, and it mostly has relied on concepts of capitalism and ideas that the left wing is traditionally known to oppose, and then go about talking as to why this rise of left wing politics is going to affect all of those.
Okay. What is the group that we're characterizing?
Would it be the population of Western Europe supporting the rise of far left politics?
It is written on the left side. Center left individuals.
Oh, center left and oh, is it
Yes.
okay? Oh, is it that the moderates are slowly leaning towards the left because of the rise of far left politics?
Yes, they're leaving. They're
All
going.
right,
They're going away. That's the point of characterization. That's the argument.
all
They're
right.
moving. They're moving more to the right.
Hmm.
So let's characterize center left individuals. What are they like?
Center left individuals could be characterized as individuals whose political ideology, for the most part, can be on either side on any given topic. Like for one particular topic, they could be leaning towards the right, and one would mean that for a majority of topics, they hold left-leaning views rather than right-leaning views. That'd be a good way to characterize them.
Yes. Can you give examples?
All right. Let's assume I am okay. I am an Indian, so let's say I'm Indian. Right wing and left wing. Uh, okay, this might be a little bit. Okay, let's say I'm an American. My views on abortion might be pro-life. Let's say that would be a right-wing view to hold. But my views on gun ownership might be that guns should be heavily regulated or banned. That would be left-wing. So in that case,
Exactly.
I would.
Perfect. Perfect.
All right.
Stop the saw. Perfect. Great. Great characteristic. Okay. Why is this the case? Why do these individuals think this way? What are inherent incentives to them?
Wouldn't it be dependent on their like personal lives and so forth? Why they hold the
Mhm.
views that they hold on different topics?
Exactly.
Like
And what are
so.
inherent characteristics of their personal lives or incentives?
Um. All right. Maybe this person that I've just described, this US citizen, maybe they're a parent. They want gun ownership to be banned because they don't want their children to die. But at the same time, they're devout Christians. So they want pro-life. They support pro-life. They believe that birth begins at conception. Like a human being is inside the womb. So maybe it's their personal. It's that you can have conflicting ideologies in one person, and that's why center.
Can you mute the speaker, please? Who Irina? Yeah, thank you. Okay, perfect. Yeah, you have conflicting views. The first reason as to why they are the way they are is religion. Like that's many of these people that are within these countries are religious, thus they're less susceptible to um like socialist like not socialist but like far left types of ideas. Okay, this is the first reason. What other characteristics do these people have?
Maybe their economic characteristics, like where they're from, are they middle class, upper
Exactly.
class, or lower class? Yeah.
Exactly,
So
yes.
obvious. So obviously, someone from a lower class income background would be more likely to support left-leaning policies because the left is always for class action and more sharing, less keeping, kind of. I mean, to make it very simplistic, right? But then the richer you are, or even middle class to a certain extent, conservative policies might make more sense because they're for tax breaks and things like that. Would that work as a
Mhm.
characterization?
That's perfect. Can you mute Tershreya, please? Thank you. Yeah, exactly. So if they're from a certain socioeconomic background, let's say uh, they are um, they are middle class, as you said, which a majority of the population within Western Europe or like the North America or whatever are actually middle class. These people have a vested interest against high taxes, progressive taxation, things like that. They want to pay as less as possible because they're self-interested, meaning that they won't support the redistributive policies that are on the side of what do you call it, on the far left part of the spectrum. Good. These are two of the key incentives that lead to them not supporting far left political parties, which means that they, on the balance of probabilities, would support either a center right, but in certain cases, maybe even the conservative party, because they view the conservative party as more center than the far left part of it. And that's how you explain the decision making. Very good. This is different from the problem solution aspect, because we're simply pointing to the reason as to why a phenomenon happened and why we regret it, and what is the inherent characteristics of this. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. But one thing here, the motion says this house regrets the rise of far left politics in Western Europe. So why were we talking about how, you know, center right or right individuals are more prominent? Like, why was that the characterization we focused on?
We're not characterizing that. We are characterizing why center-left individuals will be alienated by this rise.
Oh, understood, understood. All right. Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
Cool. Hold on, let me check if everyone is muted, because there are these random sounds. Okay. Fourthly, anti-systemic parties. Who would like to characterize them?
Could you just give some context on what exactly are anti-systemic parties?
Anti-systemic parties are like the Communist Party in Greece that whose political platform is removing the democratic process, setting up a communist utopia, and never forming a coalition with anyone. Although I've given you the characteristics based upon this, just by saying this. Parties that are basically inherently against what is the normal order of things, that challenge fundamental aspects of the way society functions. I'm not sure what is the Indian equivalent, but I'm 100% sure you have such a party, right?
Yeah.
Usually they're either communists or fascists. These are the two options for this.
Maybe
Yeah.
the CPIM in India. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, basically, I gave you the characterization. Then we can move on. Cool. Does anyone have any questions up until this moment, or should we move on?
I have a question.
Yep, go for it.
So for the fourth one, you gave like a pretty short characterization. So sometimes when, like, I'm not sure when I should give like short characterization or a long characterization.
Well, this is something that we're actually going to cover within the next slides. But the general rule of thumb is, in debating, if you focus more than 3 minutes on something, you may be doing it wrongly. Or at least you may be focusing too much of your time on that particular thing. So it's always bad to do it too little. So obviously I wouldn't characterize them this way. Obviously, we didn't give reasons as to why they are the way that they are. Although I don't think in this debate anyone would really disagree with this aspect of anti-systemic parties. They'll most likely try to give some kind of other, if we Oppo try to give some kind of other random stuff that could be associated with these political parties. But the general rule of thumb is you should characterize enough so that you see a judge understands what you're trying to explain to them, and provide enough analysis, or like the most crucial, the most basic reasoning as to why that's the case. So what is like the first tier reasoning behind why an actor acts the way that they act? And usually these are like along the lines of what is the self-interest aspect of the actor and things of this sort, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Okay, let's go to other slide after we did some. And by the way, the point here, guys, is if you are struggling with just basic characterization, pick a motion, pick an argument, and just follow like just follow these my bad, guys. I don't know how to do this while I'm recording. So basically just follow this, like what are the inherent traits, features of the thing that we're characterizing, and what are the reason behind the characterization. And you do it like this. Cool. So the question then is how to make this characterization realistic. Let me just remove this thing here. Realistic. So there are a couple of things here. The first and most basic thing is to have real world examples. So uh, uh, unfortunately, there is no magic wand to this. You just have to read up about it as much as possible. Now, you could be strategic about it. You could, let's say, break down the amount of, I don't know, like, what do you call that? Types of motions that exist. So, like, there are economic motions, political motions, there are like social movements, feminism, moral motions. You could break it down. I actually have a video on this about this on my YouTube channel, where it's like how to improve in debating, where I talk a lot about it. So you can check that out and like and subscribe. But like the general point here is that in order to improve, you need to just simply read up about it. The thing that I used to like to do is whenever a topic would pique my interest and I had free time, like let's say a Saturday or a Sunday, I would just go randomly read up online or like watch some videos on a topic to get as educated on it as much as possible. Obviously, you can't cover everything, but that's a generally like good way for you to improve and get this type of things. But there are two important things to note here. The first is that you need to keep it short. And by short, I don't mean just say something in 15 seconds and go about it, but it shouldn't be above 3 minutes, right? You need to ask yourself what part of the thing that I read about like wins the debate. Like, what is a debater terminology that could be used? So, does the debater, for example, need to know all of the like 50 pages of article that I read about this? Probably not. They need to do the equivalent of like skimming through it and reading on what is the important things about it. So always ask yourself this question: what I need to like read up about, what was like necessary for a debater to know when I'm reading and researching this type of things. In this regard, video format is superior to a certain extent because someone is explaining it in a video format, and then you can like simply copy paste by copying the explanation within your speeches as a beginning. Then you need to find your own way of explaining things. Cool. Second thing is just us. This is, I think, the number one reason where people get this wrong. Assume that the judge doesn't know about the example that you're talking about or about the characteristic that you're talking about. I have seen teams so many times just randomly state an example or something like that, and me to be like, yeah, I should probably know that word, right? No, you don't. The most funny example, I have two of them. The first is whenever a British debater uses the words first past the post, and even making absurd claims of the tier, most countries on this planet are first past the post system. And I'm sitting in the debate and I'm like, what do these words mean? Honestly, what does this mean? First past the post and things like that. So afterwards, someone is again on mute. Please mute yourself. After like this, please mute yourself. After like this, these debates where I would hear this, I would obviously read up about it. And this was me from a speaker perspective. I had no idea what they were talking about. But if I were to be judging this and you were to just say literal the words first past the post, I would have no idea what you're meaning. But by the way, for the people like that are watching, this is like their political system. Go and read up about it. It requires a whole long explanation for me to explain how it goes. And I may not be the best person to explain it, but just the core logic here is when you're saying some words like this, you need to explain what the words mean. The other funny example is I've seen a lot of Australian debaters just say the words institutional knowledge, and I have no idea what institutional knowledge means. What exactly are you going about? What is the example? They don't even give an example. They just say it as a buzzword and expect you to know about it. And by the way, this is like for situations that the judge actually doesn't know what you're trying to explain. By definition, if the judge isn't like, if understand the terminology that you're trying to use on them, then you shouldn't buy that terminology even if you know what it means. So let's say I have an economics degree and I would know like what quantitative easing is or something like that. But if you just say this word and you don't necessarily explain it, what is the meaning behind this word, then probably an average informed voter doesn't have an economics degree and shouldn't know what this is or shouldn't give the analysis instead of you when you're explaining this type of thing. So the rule of thumb is like picture the judge as someone who has no idea what you're talking about. Here's the analogy that you need to do. So, like, is football or cricket violence a big thing in India, or any sports violence?
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah. So here in Europe, like it's football violence. I assume it's cricket violence. In India, I don't know. Like, what is the thing? But picture it like this. Imagine you're being judged by a person who all their life have lived in like a gated community, fairly privileged. They went to like a private school and then an Ivy League school. And then you get the motion about, I don't know, football violence and something about football violence or things like that. Would this person, in your opinion, have the same susceptibility to the characterization that you're trying to explain as someone who is from such a country? What do you guys think?
I mean, they wouldn't, I think. So you would have to make the difference clear.
I couldn't understand you. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
I was just saying that no, the susceptibility would differ depending upon the background of the person.
Exactly. And the bottom line is you shouldn't take this risk at all. You should assume that the person doesn't have an idea what you're talking about, make it as clear as possible, and explain it adequately. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it
Uh,
does.
hold on, guys. I need to go and check something out. I think someone's on my door. Okay, sorry about that. Cool. So yeah, that's the bottom line. So always assume. I hope this analogy with the football violence is like um good in making you understand this type of things. Okay. Second thing is to incorporate like what I call powerful storytelling, or you could uh use some other words, but basically try to explain it as if you are there, right? Like you're trying to explain to the judge as if they themselves are physically there. You're trying to visualize to them as much as possible what is the thing that's happening. So let's say we're talking about like the motions about, I don't know, like a corrupt autocracy in a state like that. You could do things like imagine like what it's like for the people that are living under these circumstances. Imagine what their day-to-day lives is when they, for example, have to go to court and it's a kangaroo court and like the judge already knows what the decision is, but it's like for something super super bad, because like something could have happened to them. Either their kid could have died in a car crash, and the guy gets out scot-free because you know it's a corrupt democracy, and he has connection to the party or to the regime or to someone within that. Or like when you're trying to explain, like let's say the second thing, like imagine being in these circumstances, like what would you do? So like for criminal justice debates where you're trying to explain the nuances of why people could do crime, and you're trying to explain that most people do crime out of necessity. Like you could tell them, imagine what it's like to like not have food for the next 10 days, and you have no money, no shelter, nothing like that. You're just randomly standing there. And why wouldn't you choose to, for example, rob a store? Why wouldn't you choose, for example, to sell drugs? Why wouldn't you choose to do all of these things if you have literally no inherent option in front of you, and you are forced to and pushed to do this type of behavior? Wouldn't you do it yourself? So basically, visualizing it in this way and using these specific tones makes it as if like you're watching a movie, you know. And you and in online debating, it's like a bit harder to do, obviously, because we're all Zoom characters. But like in person, especially, where we can walk around, when you can explain this to the judges and try to emotionally persuade them, that's the moment when your characterization really hits the mark. When you're able to actually basically tell them the story behind the group of people or the organizations that you're trying to explain to them. As again, as if you are there, like as if you as the judge are in that moment. Cool. Third thing is to try to do less with more. So like think about, and this again with the first and second tier thing that I try to explain, like what is like the best example on our site? Are the examples or points that we're trying to characterize actually against us? So this is like when people do over characterization, and this all of this problem comes in prep, where you're like, yeah, and there's this other characteristic, and yeah, there's this other thing, but is that thing really gonna win you the debate? Like, for example, pointing out, so like if you look at the colonialism example, like where we're talking about this. And we look at like how maybe the government could potentially, because they have a beef with this Western corporation, do X amount of thing, but in reality, that's not their primary incentive. Like, yes, it's an additional reason, but it doesn't really seem to push the point. However, when you're looking at things like, for example, people living in poverty, when, for example, people striving into nationalism and these type of things. So, for example, you may have a military junta that takes the government and decides to nationalize or steal the mine in this particular moment. Well, this is a much more stronger and much more compelling reason. So there are two things to note here. The first is this is at best it's just wasting time on another reason that will be responded to very easily by the other side, and you are losing your time. But what's the worst thing? And here's the worst thing. At worst, this could mean that a mischaracterization, the other team taking this second point of characterization that you do, and this is what American debaters like to do a lot. They always cherry pick like the weak, take it, and they say, this is the argument. This is the only reason that they give, and I'm going to respond to it in wit. And totally disregarding the other two valid reasons that you have. This is how like most of these people blah blah blah. But yeah, so like try to do less with more, because either nothing will happen against you and you're just wasting time, or this could be a very bad outcome for you when like you are being mischaracterized. So actually, I know it sounds counterintuitive, but actually cutting down on certain aspects of the analysis could help you more. And finally, you need to communicate the importance of the characterization to the judge. Explains to you how most likely these individual actors are true. There happen. This is what we call like debate. What was it called? Debate commentary, or like just pointing out to how different things do what in the debate, and it's super super important for characterization. Ideally, the judge should be able to see this on their own, but unfortunately, we're not like in an ideal situation. There are other speakers. The judge has limited time to look at what you're trying to say. So like just remembering to point this out could be very, very crucial. So this is how you make your characterization realistic. Are there any questions on this bit? Cool. Let's move on. How to add nuance. And this is like what I think people struggle a lot with. So basically ask yourself the very simple question, which is, does this apply in all situations? And this is what we kind of did with the center-left example in the before, right? Because we asked ourselves, okay, does the thing that we're trying to explain, I don't know, like, for example, them being, like kind of supporting the left-wing policies, but, like still being open to some right-wing policies. What type of things does this apply in all situations? Probably not, right? Because it's on a spectrum. It varies. So to add nuance, you could say some people might like the far right like policies, but we don't think that's the majority of people. And here are reasons why. Additional questions that you could ask yourself is, are there exceptions to the rule? So, for example, when we looked at the Eastern European characteristic, there are certain countries that are pro left wing. Some of them, obviously, there are exceptions to the rule, but we still think that the majority of situations are the way that characterized there. Are there moments where the actor doesn't act this way? Now, this is super important because this could be a way for the opposition to try to respond to you by to say, okay, this could be true, but we don't think that this applies in this one specific moment or one specific scenario. So let's say if you're characterizing that corrupt regimes like corrupt regimes operate like with the West and don't want to adhere to the Western human rights standards or things like that. Opposition could, for example, say, okay, but the moments where they don't uphold these rules and they don't operate with this is actually when we're talking about the West, for example, stopping their money or the West imposing sanctions on them and things like that. Then when they're calculating these two things, like maybe making some human rights changes versus receiving the money, they'll choose to do that and that. And that's how you are able to, for example, also understand where the debate is likely to take place and to make your argument stronger. And to explain where the two characterizations clash, which is something that we'll cover in the next slide. So don't worry. But just for the sake of adding nuance here, it's important to note. Okay, we understand that maybe in this situation they won't tag this way. However, this is why this situation isn't likely, or why this is not true, or whatever. And like asking, and finally just asking yourself, like, is this an important nuance? Like, is this a nuance that is important for me to add to add? And so basically you would ask yourself the question, okay, but why is it important for me to explain the importance of nuance? Because that way you could stop certain attacks on your case, and it makes your case seem stronger. It makes your case seem more plausible and seem more likely to the judge. It makes it seem more realistic, when you are talking about exceptions and things like that. And like the neat trick here is after you finished explaining a point, you could stop it by saying, let's add some nuance here. Does this mean blah, blah, blah? Well, yes, but in the majority of cases, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And so like the example that I gave here is we agree that these corrupt countries do some good things for their people sometimes, but the incentives of our incentives that they're very corrupt. They like to restrict resources from the people. They'd like to make their lives worse in order to retain power, apply in the majority of cases. Pointing out too that something happens sometimes doesn't constitute a fully holistically built characterization as to what they will do in the majority of circumstances, in the majority of times. Does this make sense? Cool. Fun trick that you can do is when you're building the argument in your writing, you can literally just write nuance and add the nuance to your argument. Does anyone have any questions on this?
Is adding nuance kind of like hedging?
Kind of like what?
Hedging, like basically giving criteria where these incentives might fail, but those criteria are very rare or something like that.
Yes, that's a form. That's one aspect of it. So like to minimize the attacks that you're getting. But the other aspect of this is just to make sure that the judge agrees with your characterization. Because debating is honestly about the margins of things and about little changes. It's not about world-changing things that will happen. Like you can't really convey that in a 7 or 8 minute speech. But what you can do is explain these little changes and explain these nuances. And it makes like more likely that a judge agrees with your characterization the more nuanced it is. This is a general rule of thumb.
Okay, understood.
Okay. So how to defend your characterization? So obviously, they will attack. Like it's like if a team straight up agrees with your characterization, unless it's it's impossible for them to respond to it, they're obviously going to attack your characterization. Or if they're like complete novices and they don't know what they're doing. So how can they attack your characterization? The first and most basic thing is like they can attack your examples, which there's how do you say a random generated response that you can give in all situations, which is just to say there are other examples on the thing that you are talking about, right? Like ultimately, examples are important for grounding your case in reality, but the example, it doesn't make you win the debate automatically, right? Or responding to the example. So just saying, like we have other examples for this, that are equally possible as you. So we should look at what is the inherent characteristics of the actor in this moment. So like this is very simplistic rebuttal that you can just deal with by just pointing out to their other examples. And we also provided analysis for our examples. They didn't provide anything for theirs. They asserted. So this is the first thing. The second thing is to attack the analysis, which is now we're talking. So basically, this goes along the lines of them corporations, you saying out they don't have profit incentives in all cases. Certain cases they care about other things. So basically, the way that you deal with this response is just to say, okay, what is the reasoning that they're providing against this, and why is that reasoning not true? Or it would be like, let's say, autocratic regimes want to control power, like they want to keep their power, and then I'm saying, oh, that's not really like that strong of an incentive to them because, like, if they're already retaining their power, if they have other means, then that really doesn't mean that that's their primary motivation and primary incentive. Other things may also be. Or you may not have it, or at least they perceive it this way, that it could be fragile, that maybe a coup could happen, maybe a protest could happen. And so like there are multiple examples of how dictators have fallen, so they want to keep and consolidate their power. Cool. So this is how you respond back to the responses. And the third final thing is they could, and this is 100% how these debates play out, is they'll provide alternative characterization to it. So this is where they say, we agree, this could be a possible characterization. We just think our characterization is more likely, which is a totally different characterization. And so like here's how you deal with this. So the first is, what are the reasons for their characterization? Because ultimately what makes the characterization stable is the actual likelihood analysis for which they provide. And then just asking yourself, why are these not true or not true in the majority of scenarios in order to respond to those reasons for that characterization. So like here's the thing. If we're doing, I don't know, a criminal, some debate about sentencing or something like that, and one group of people, we provide the analysis, people turn to crime based on necessity, that they have to do this crime. They, in opposition, respond to us by saying, we agree that certain cases this happens, but we think in the majority of cases people do crime because of their own self-interest and because of like them wanting to earn money and become millionaires or things like that. Because they're self-interested. So to respond to this characterization, all you have to do is just point out to, hold on, there are super many alternatives for you to get rich and earn money that are not contingent on you doing crime. Why would people have a normal risk calculus, meaning that they don't necessarily want to engage in criminal behavior, meaning that they will still, we agree that they want to get rich, but why would they turn to crime is a weird link for us. However, the people that don't have alternatives are the people that we talk about, that do crime out of necessity because they have to and things like that. So this is how you respond back to the characterization. You find what is the reason and how to rebut that reason. Secondly, is just to weigh why your reasons are more likely than theirs. This is particularly if you are debating about X group and that X group doing one thing or another thing. Now, keep in mind, this is like more advanced debating, right? So like you shouldn't be very scared if you are unable to do this. It's even like the top teams struggle with doing this type of thing because it's like so hard to ask yourself, okay, why is something more likely than another thing? What could be reasons here? And like if you reach this moment, obviously you're like top level debater right now. So like the way that you should think about it is to just in general ask yourself this question. Like try to explain why is it likely. Maybe you could have even like not the best explanation here, an imperfect explanation, but you have an explanation, which is crucial. You have something to be that you could give when you're comparing two characteristics. So yeah, and what is more likely and things like that. And finally, you could, and this is like the ultimate play, which it's like the even if, which is why do you win even if their characterization is true? This could work. Like I want to make a disclaimer. This is a strategy that you can incorporate rarely. It's not a strategy that you can incorporate all the time. In most cases, you'll have to just beat their characterization. But if you have the ability, just by asking yourself the question and something cool comes to your mind as an idea or an argument, something creative, go for it. Like, but if you can't and it doesn't seem reasonable, then maybe it's a bad idea to run this strategy, because that way you're accepting their characterization and still beating them, which is super advanced move to do. But yeah, but generally they're going to do one of three things: attack your example, attack your analysis, provide alternative characterization. Maybe they'll do all three. You have to basically respond back and rebut and weigh against all three in order to make sure that your characterization is legit. Does anyone have any questions on this?
Would you advise against, giving an imperfect response, or just like not engaging with their alternative characterization at all? Like, which one would be better?
No, you always have to engage with their alternative characterization. Always. It's what would be alternative to pretend like it didn't happen? Like that's just bad debating, like
Agreed, but so like if I give an imperfect response, wouldn't there be more chances of the judge giving the characterization to them?
no, that's not how judging works.
All right.
Judging
Okay.
judging works holistically, like looking at contributions, weighing them, and stuff like that. At worst, you are probably just at ground zero, right? You attempted to do something and you failed. Then the judge has to evaluate the two characteristics on judging merits, and if they're a good judge, they'll look at who analyzed their characterization better. If they're a bad judge, it's a coin flip. Um, but in any case, trying to respond to a characterization and failing is better than not responding at all. Like this strategy of not doing something uh, is just plain absurd. And it generally shows to like the problem of non-rebuttal within debating, where debaters just choose to not engage and not respond in today's day and age. They're just like, oh yeah, like I don't know, we can win and I'll never respond to anything that you say, or I just don't want to respond because I like this part of the argument. Like this is just bad debating. You have to engage. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Cool. Let's move on. But I think, yep, we are done actually. This was the presentation. So this is it. Does anyone want us to go back and explain some concepts a bit more? Or if you have any questions now?